In the previous lessons, we have discussed and learned about data collection and processing. On completion of the research study and after obtaining the research results, the real skill of a researcher lies in analyzing and interpreting the findings and linking them with the propositions formulated in the form of research hypothesis at the beginning of the study. The statistical or qualitative summary of results would be little more than numbers or conclusions unless one is able to present the documented version of the research endeavor. So, one cannot overemphasize the significance of a well documented and structured research report. Just like all the other steps in the research process, documentation too requires a careful and sequential treatment. So, in this lesson, we'll be discussing in detail the documentation of the research study. We will be taking up what is a report, types of report. Then we'll move on to research report, wherein we'll be taking up components of a research report, its title, abstract, what should be included and what should be excluded from abstract, the introduction, body of the research, literature review and its significance, literature review steps, research methods, results, discussion, and then the references. So, starting with what is a report? Well, a report is a written document on a particular topic which conveys information and ideas and may also make recommendations. Reports often form the basis of crucial decision making and interpretations. Inaccurate, incomplete, and poorly written reports fail to achieve their purpose and reflect on the decision which will be ultimately made. Definitely, if we are working on an inaccurate and incomplete and poorly written reports, then we may land up in coming to a decision which may create haywire in lives. So, a good report should be written by keeping the following features in mind. One should clearly report what all points he or she want to convey to the readers. The report should be concise with information kept to a necessary minimum and arranged logically under various headings and subheadings. All information should be correct and supported by the evidence. Then the necessary relevant material should be included in the complete report. So, with these points, let us move on to what are the various types of reports. Broadly speaking, there can be two types of reports, which are brief reports and detailed reports. Brief reports are generally short, not formally structured. The information provided by them has limited scope. They can be basic reports or working papers, which are written for the purpose of recording the process carried out in terms of scope and framework of the study, the methodology followed, and the instrument designs. Then we can have survey reports. Apart from these, the detailed reports are the technical reports and the business reports. Technical reports take into consideration the major documents that includes basic reports, interpretations, conclusions, results, data, sampling plan, collection, analysis, everything. Whereas business reports includes the conclusions by a business manager, tables, figures, pictorial representations, all these form the part of business reports. However, if we go on minute classification of the reports, then the general types of reports are: first, the informational report. Informational report are those reports or are those business reports that provide facts, data, feedback, and other types of information without analysis or recommendations. So that means the reports without recommendations and analysis are the information reports. Whereas analytical reports are the information reports with the analysis and recommendations. Informational reports are informations or instructions presenting information. In this, reader sees the details of events, activities, or conditions. And again repeating, in informational reports, there is no analysis of the situation, there is no conclusion, and there is no recommendation. Whereas in analytical, they are written to solve the problems. In this, information is analyzed and conclusions are drawn and recommendations are made. Okay, let us give you a case. And the case says, a boss wants to consider the changing of the work schedule from 50 hours over 6 days a week to 50 hours over 5 days a week. So for that, he wants to know that if this will cause any employee dissatisfaction or increase the cost of overtime. So in this case, what should be done? Should an informational report be cited, or should an analytical report be created? The answer to this is that preference is the informational report, because the boss wants the schedule to be informed from 50 hours 6 days a week to 50 hours 5 days a week. But if we want to analyze the employee dissatisfaction, the increase of cost, overtime, etc., then recommendations and analysis can come, leading to an analytical report. Then the another type of report is the persuasive report. Persuasive, as the name suggests, are the extension of analytical reports whose focus is to sell an idea or a service or a product. Persuasive writing provides the opportunity to convince someone to adopt a particular viewpoint. It is very common in ad campaigns where marketing wants to convince customer to buy something. In reports, proposals are the most common example of the persuasive report. Then we have the other report types as incident report, where we want to describe the completion of some incident or some situation or something that was planned. Accident report reports how someone was hurt or how something was damaged. Then we can have sales report, wherein the entire report of how the selling takes place is taken up in the report. Then we have progress report, which is an academic report on how and why something has changed over the time. This progress report have been given to us right from our childhood. That was report with grade A, B, C or so. So progress report measures that academic performances. Then we have feasibility study or report. This describes something that has happened. So if you remember, we said that pilot study was a feasibility study because it conveys that we have conducted a short research survey and we are producing the report for the same. Then we can have recommendation report, which is basically highlighting on the fact that how practical a proposal is. Then a site is a report on what the organization should do. Case study report describes how goods and services were sold, what are the reasons, then any particular situation related to person, individual, etc. All these reports come under case study. Then we have periodic operating reports that monitor and control the production, sales, shipping, services, etc. Next, we have situational report that describes some conferences, seminars, etc. So these are one-time events which are being reported via situational report. Then some investigative or informational report is again taken into examination by support of facts, problems, and little analysis. Then we have compliance report, which majorly goes with the government agencies and laws. If we want to respond to government agencies and laws, then we produce a compliance report. Then we have justification report, wherein the management gives some justification related to solving problems and making decisions. Then we have yardstick report. As the name is suggesting, we compare the alternatives against the yardstick criteria. And ultimately, what we are going to study in detail is the research studies report, which takes into account the study problems that are scientifically analyzed. We take up a problem, we develop that problem, the hypothesis is made, data is collected, data is analyzed, results are drawn, and ultimately the conclusions are made on the research taken into account. So this is the research study report, which we will be taking up in detail just now. So we are beginning with how to write a research paper, that is a research report. We'll be first explaining what all is there in a research paper, how to write a research paper, and then we'll be taking up two crisp examples. One will be survey based research paper and one will be modeling based research paper. So how to write the survey based research paper and how to write a model based research paper, that we'll be taking up once we discuss the concepts. So let us take up first the definition of a research report. A research is a systematic investigation which is framed into study of a natural phenomenon or materials or sources of existing condition of the society in order to identify facts or to get additional information and derive new conclusions. So, research report takes into account the additions that one is trying to put on in a particular field or an area. Research report is a production process which needs a number of inputs to produce new knowledge and application of new and existing knowledge to generate technology that ultimately may generate economic prosperity of a nation. Simply, a research paper or report is a systematic write-up on findings of the study, including methodologies, discussion, conclusion, etc., following a definite style. That is a research paper basically have a preliminary section that includes title, abstract, and if you're writing a report, then that will have TOC, that is table of contents. Preliminary section also includes acknowledgements, etc. Then we have background section, which includes the problem statement, study introduction and background, scope, review of literature. Then the next step is methodology section, which includes, especially for a survey based or for research design based study, therein we have research design, sampling design, data collection, data analysis, and then we have findings and solutions, and then we end up with the conclusion section, and last we have the references, and if we are writing a report, then it may also have glossary of terms in the appendix. So the exact component model of a research paper is given by this picture. So if you look at this picture, this is like a king player of a chess game. So the entire model is called king model. However, if you look the light gray part, then that represents the hourglass shape. So that is called as the hourglass model, which takes into account the introduction part, body part, and the discussion part. And if we want to write the complete paper, then that should have title, abstract, and references too. So title, abstract, and references, they add on to our analysis, to our paper, like a king is being set on a throne. So let us first take up the topmost branch of the component of a research report, which is the title. The title is the one which is being cited everywhere, which is being read most. So it should be comprehensive and convey the right meaning. According to Pete et al., effective titles should identify the main issue of the paper, should begin with the subject of the paper, should be accurate, should be unambiguous, should not conflict with other titles, should be specific, and should be complete. So like if you are saying consumer behavior analysis, then this is incomplete title because you are not mentioning the consumer behavior analysis on what stream, on what particular region, etc. Then the title should not contain abbreviations unless they are very well known by the target audience, like CPU, HTML. These are the common abbreviations that can be put up, but do avoid putting up the abbreviations. Do not write CB analysis. CB is consumer behavior, but that is not a recognized abbreviation. Then it should be specific enough to describe the contents of the paper, but should also technically be correct, maintaining the ethics of the research papers. That is, it should not conflict with the titles of the other research papers. Title should be good enough that it should convey to the readers the summary of the main players in the experiment and the character of their relationship to each other, like consumer buying behavior towards organic food, a study in Delhi NCR. So this is a comprehensive title which can be used for writing a research paper title. Then the next is the abstract of the paper. So this abstract is the mirror of your study. Most of the conferences first take into account the abstract of the paper because that gives in crisp manner or in summary form what you are going to take up in the research study. So an abstract comprises a one-para summary of the whole paper. Abstracts have been increasingly important as electronic publication databases are the primary means of finding research reports in a certain subject area today. Hence, everything of relevance to potential readers should be in the abstract, everything else not. An informative abstract extracts everything relevant from the paper, such as research objectives addressed, methods employed in solving the problems, results obtained, conclusion drawn. Such abstracts may serve as a highly aggregated substitute for a full paper. Remember, these abstracts are the ones which are available even if the full research paper is not available. So your abstract is the leader of your entire research paper. So be comprehensive in writing abstract. Use keywords so that if your paper is being searched with that key topics or with that keywords, then your paper might get cited. That increases the view of the research paper. So there are some do's and don'ts with respect to abstract, and the do's are: first, we must include the motivation, that is, why we do care about the problems and the results. Then, the problem, what problem is the paper trying to solve and what is the scope of the paper. Then, in 1 or 2 lines, it should mention what solution you are giving, what are the answer to the problems that you are taking into account, and what are the implications. Then one should not include the references, the entire conclusion or information, the tables, the graphs, references. These are not to be included in the abstract part. Moving on to the introduction section of a research paper, we should have that introduction should be able to answer the following questions, although not in depth but in precise manner. And do remember that introduction is the beginning of a research paper. So if the beginning is relevant, that means your halfway is done. So be careful while taking up the introduction section. It should be grammatically correct. It should be relevant to what you are stating as per the research problem. Then it should take into consideration what the research is all about. It should take into consideration why is it relevant that you are conducting this research. What are the issues or the problems? What is the proposed solution or approach? What can one expect in the rest of the research? Then it can tell the reader what the problem is, what question you will try to answer, and what is its important. It might be important for practical reasons, or it is giving a theoretical proof. But remember, do not neglect mentioning the reason of the development of this research paper that you are putting up. Then do avoid editorialization, personal opinion, and judgmental statements. Be very careful with these sensitive statements. Then hypotheses are usually stated formally in the closing paragraph of the introduction. This is not a hardcore rule, but usually it is followed that we keep up hypothesis during the last of the introduction of the research paper. So be very careful while putting up the research paper introduction. Introduction should be apt. It should convey in small paras what you want to take up in the entire coming up sections of the research paper. Then next starts the body of the research paper, and this body begins with the review section. So, the body of a paper reports on the actual research done to answer the research question or problem identified in the introduction. It should be written as if it were an unfolding discussion, each idea at a time. Often, the body comprises of several sections and subsections, whereas structure, organization, and content depend heavily on the type of paper, publication outlet, publisher, and the creativity of the authors. One thing that can be avoided in the body is subsections. We should try to limit ourselves into sections and subsections. It's good practice if we avoid breaking too much of a paper. So suppose you are writing section 2, which is modeling framework. Then try to limit yourself to section 2.1, 2.2. One should avoid going to 2.1.1 and so on. Then in empirical papers, the paper body describes the material and data used for the study, the methodologies applied to answer the research questions, and the results obtained. For case study based papers, the application of existing methods, theories, and tools are important. Then, crucial is the value of reflections abstracted from the experience and their relevance to other designers or to researchers working on related methods, theories, or tools. Then, for methodology based papers, a novel method should be made up which can be used for practical settings too. But the paper should be clear about the intended audience. Theory paper describe principles, concepts, models on which empirical experience methodology is based. Authors of theoretical papers are expected to position their ideas within a broad context of related frameworks and theories. They should support it with the relevant arguments, judgments, past records, and the other related theories. Then, generally, the body of paper answers two questions, namely, how the research question is addressed, and secondly, what was found. So, be considerate that your body part of the research paper takes into account the research that you are doing. And this research which you are doing begins with the literature review. Literature review is one of the most significant topics while writing a research paper. We'll be taking up LR in detail in the next sections. At present, we'll just limit ourselves to the significance of LR, that is literature review. So, be careful that when you are putting up literature review, you are demonstrating your familiarity with the topic and scholarly context. Be careful that you are developing a theoretical framework and methodology for your research. Position yourself in relation to other researchers and theorists. Show how your research addresses a gap or contributes to a debate. Nowadays, literature review can be put up in tabular form or in hierarchy form, which represents how your topic is gaining an add-on to the existing literature. So, you may even present your literature review in paragraphs or in tabular forms or in graph forms wherein hierarchies are there, and then you can put up what you intend to do in the research paper. How is that an add-on to the existing literature? So there are few steps that needs to be followed while taking up literature review. We need to search for a relevant literature. For any given topic, there is wide zone where you can put up yourself. But be careful that if you are taking up literature review, then you should search for your relevant topic. For example, suppose we are going with consumer behavior analysis. Now, there are thousands of research papers related to consumer behavior analysis, and you cannot take up each and every research paper in that. So, be very careful that you are intending and taking the relevant literature only. Do evaluate your sources, whether they are authentic, whether they are validated, whether they are published in proper resources or they are proper articles. Then identify the theme, debates, and gaps. Outline the structure and then write your literature review. For any research paper, literature review provides the base. In fact, in earlier times, MPhil was basically done, and this MPhil used to provide a base to the PhD. Why? Because in MPhil, the major focus was to study the existing literature, and then when a person switch over to PhD, then he has that strong background. So be very careful while taking up your literature review. Then moving on to research methods, one should be very careful while giving up the research methods. Whatever methods you are using, that is either observation method or interview method or document analysis or visual data, movies, photos, audios, etc., whatever you are putting up, what materials you are using for conducting a research, how data is collected and analyzed, this all should be stated under research methods. Then, what or who is studied, how many objects are studied, how the objects have been selected, these all should be kept up in research methods. For example, your sample size is say 300, then you are taking random sampling, stratified sampling, what is the research design, etc. All this come under research method only. Describe what you actually did, then do give up the explanation of conduct of research in minute detailing in research method section. Do give the procedure that how you conducted the research. This can be in terms of algorithm. Do acknowledge the boundaries of the used methods. For example, if you are using Likert scale, then do mention that it is a reliable source, and if you're keeping up your own scale, then you have to go with the reliability of that scale. So do acknowledge the boundaries of the used methods. And then once you have kept up the methods that you are taking up, there comes the result section. So this is where you present the results of your experiments. The result section should always be there in the past tense. The result section summarizes the data and the statistical treatment of them. If the data is relatively simple, then you can report it via tables or figures. Otherwise, you can present your subjective data in short, precise form, and if it's hypothesis, then you can put your hypothesis, whether it's being accepted or rejected. You can present the results in the same order as you have made your predictions in the introduction, and do it in simple sentences. Do not make use of complex and too much technical writings. And do remember, here you just need to give up the results that you are obtaining from the experiment you conducted. Do not discuss the implications, interpretations, theoretical significance, managerial implications of your result in result section. That is to be put up either in conclusion and discussion section or conclusion and future scope section, or in discussion section, or in managerial implication section, but do not put up in result section. And then the second last part or the last part of the paper is the discussion. Why we are saying second last part? Because after this the only left out part will be references. Otherwise, last is indicating that here you are completing your work. So the discussion part is sometimes called as discussion or discussion and conclusion or simply conclusion or conclusion with future scope or managerial implications. So with these names we keep up the discussion section. A presentation of background information as well as what you did is kept up in discussion section. A brief summary of the results, whereas the focus should lie on discussing the results and not reinforcing the numbers that you obtained in the result section. A comparison of results with previously published studies should be given in discussion section. Then conclusions or hypothesis drawn from the results with summary of evidence for each conclusion should be there in the discussion section. Then proposed follow-up research, future work, outlook for the further work, these all should be kept in discussion section. Do keep in mind that your abstract should be in alignment with the discussion section. That is one of the major things to be considered while writing a research paper. And then finally, once all this is done, we move on to the references section. References has their own role. Embedding the own work in related literature is one of the essential parts of research writing. So if you have some previous work, do put up in the reference section. This is achieved by citing related work within the text and by listing all cited references at the end of the paper. So you can quote either yours or the other research papers which are relevant to your study into the entire paper, but that reference will ultimately be highlighted in the end. Then different publishers require different formats or styles for citing a paper in the text and for listing reference. So when you are selecting where you want to get your paper published, do look for the format they are asking for. There are various formats. The most common format is APA style, that is American Psychological Association style. Then there is Chicago style. Then there is CBE style, that is Council of Biology Editors. And then there is Modern Language Association style, MLA style. So whatever style is being asked by the corresponding conference paper or the research paper or the book, that accordingly you put up the references in your paper and in the listing section. One point to be noted over here is that in computer science, the most widely used styles are variations of the number system, like the style which is used by Springer-Verlag in the lecture note series, the style used by the Association for Computing Machinery, which is ACM, that is called as ACM Press, and the style used by IEEE Computer Society for most of their publications. So these are the three topmost journals of computer science: ACM, Verlag, and IEEE Computer Society. But regardless of the citation style, there are two basic rules or two must rules for the list of references. Every cited source must be listed and every listed source must be cited. It should not happen that you have some paper in your list but it is not quoted in the research paper, or you have a paper quoted in the research paper but it is not there in the list. So with these do's and don'ts in each section, you can prepare a very nice research paper in terms of writing, in terms of content, in terms of methodology, in terms of your experimentation. And do give a proper time in writing the paper. Do not write your paper in haste. A good paper requires a good time to get formulated into a very nice piece of research paper. So with this, we are ending up. Now let us quickly take two examples of research papers. One is survey-based research paper and one is modeling framework research paper, and then we'll just see how they have kept up the following sections which we have discussed in this unit. So this is the first example of the research paper that we are taking into account, and the title of this research paper is A Study on Factors Influencing on Buying Behaviors of Customers. So as the title is suggesting, this will take into consideration the factors that influence the buying behavior of customers. Now, this is the abstract part which the author have given. We can even frame the entire abstract in one paragraph. So they are first putting up the present marketing scenario, and then they are saying that consumer behavior buying has become an integral part of strategic market planning. So in order to develop a framework for the study, consumer behavior, it is helpful to begin by considering the factors which impact on consumer buying behavior, as well as the evolution of the field of consumer research and the different paradigms of thought that have influenced the discipline. So this is what the article is taking into account, and then they are saying that the objective of the research is to achieve a better understanding of consumer behavior with the factors influencing consumer buying behavior process. And then they are mentioning that they are focusing on automobile customers and their buying behavior in Pune city. So they have taken up descriptive type research design, sample size is mentioned, then customers are also mentioned. So this is representing the target customers, and then they are representing the sampling technique which they have used. Data is collected through structured questionnaire and is analyzed using Excel. Findings are derived and data analysis is taken up, and these suggestions are given at the end of the paper. Then this is important thing which what they have written, and we should also make a practice that we should write keywords in our paper. So the keywords that this particular research is taking into account is consumer buying behavior, traditional perspectives, cognitive traits, etc. So be careful while writing these research keywords, because by this, when your paper is getting searched, these keywords do play a vital role. Then the entire introduction is there. They are giving a crisp introduction, and then they are mentioning the objective and the scope of the paper. And then, as we said, that they are putting up hypothesis towards the end of introduction section. Then they are presenting a precise literature review. You can even present the literature review in tabular form or graphical form, and then they are giving up the research methodology. So this is the entire detail they are portraying up, and then comes the data analysis part. You can even divide your research paper into sections like section 1 introduction, section 3 data analysis, and so on. So then they are putting up the entire study, factors influencing, they are showing their entire study, they are portraying their results via graphs, and then they are taking up the interpretation. So they are taking up the hypothesis and their interpretation, then they are giving up the findings of the research taken into account, and ultimately they are writing up the suggestions, and then they are putting up the limitations. So finally they are ending the paper with the conclusion part, and last but not least, they are keeping up the references. Okay, so this was a survey based research paper. Now, if we have some modeling framework based research paper, then consider this for an example. This paper takes into account internet marketing with consumer barking and optimal allocation of promotional effort using genetic algorithms. So, again, abstract is being given. And then they are saying that in this paper, we are formulating an optimal promotional effort allocation problem for multi-segmented market that maximizes the total number of potential adopters under some technical constraints. So the resulting problem is a nonlinear complex programming problem which is solved via genetic algorithm, and then the numerical example is taken which illustrates the formulation and the solution. So when you're writing a non-survey based research paper, so there they are representing the introduction again, then this is the literature review. So you can present the literature review in the tabular form as they have presented. Then they have even presented some part of literature view as an algorithm based or graph based step by step. And then they are taking up the modeling framework, which is basically giving the model. Then section 4, they are moving on to the optimal effort allocation problem, that is the optimization problem that they are dealing with. Then the method for solving, which is genetic algorithm, and then they are giving a numerical example to show their workings. And if you could see that this is the managerial implication section which they have included in the research paper, how the present working could help the business. That is what managerial implications take into account. And then the conclusion with limitations is being presented. And then the references part is there. So this is how we take up non-survey research based paper. And finally, let's have a quick view on this paper also. Again, this is a research based paper wherein they are studying the factors of consumer behavior, wherein they are studying the consumer buying behavior and its influence on consumer perception. Now, in this, they are given that this is related to fashion retail in the city of Bengaluru. So, presenting in this way, the title is better. Then again, they are presenting abstract, introduction, literature review, their statement of problem, objectives, then conceptual framework, hypothesis, research methodology, data analysis. Then these are all the factor analysis tool that they have used. And then they are taking up interpretation, inferences. Crosstab is basically chi-square. And then they are giving up their findings. And then in the last, suggestions with the conclusion. And last, they are putting up references. So this is how we write any research paper. It should follow the body part and it should be in King's style structure, keeping in mind all the points that we have discussed in the unit. We can definitely end up in making a good research paper. So with this, we end up the section. Wish you all a happy learning.